You ever see something so unexpected that it just freezes you in your tracks? Like the whole world slows down and you're not even sure if your eyes are lying to you. Yeah, that happened to me one morning at the Meadowbrook Hills playground, a place where everything was supposed to be picture perfect, where the lawns were manicured within an inch of their life, where the moms wore yoga pants like uniforms and carried themselves like generals. And then out of nowhere, my daughter, who hadn't spoken in 3 years, opened her mouth and said a single word, and it was to a man everyone else there wished would just disappear into the background. Now let me back up a sec. My daughter Emma. Sweet, stubborn, beautiful Emma, she hadn't spoken a word since the accident that killed her father. 3 years of silence, 3 years of therapy, money poured into every specialist you can imagine, trauma experts, neurologists, speech pathologists, and nothing. Just silence. And then on this ordinary morning, a gardener, a man I'd barely even noticed before, crouched down beside her, and she whispered, "Hello." And in that second, I swear the air changed. My so-called friend Patricia, well, you know the type, expensive highlights, HOA president, voice sharp enough to cut glass, shrieked, "My God, get your daughter away from that man right now." She said it like he was contagious, like kindness itself was dangerous if it came from the wrong person. But Emma looked at him like she'd just been seen for the first time in years. "Mommy, he heard me," she whispered, still shaky but clear as a bell. "He really heard me." And that's when I realized all the money in the world hadn't done what this man did in 2 minutes. His name was Marcus Thompson, 35 years old, worked the gardens, kept his head down, scars running down his arms, a limp in his step, the kind of man Patricia and her little circle treated like furniture. But there was something in his eyes when he stood up that morning. Not anger, not shame, calm, unshakable calm, like he'd stared down worse than a bunch of suburban moms. And from that moment on, everything in Meadowbrook Hills started shifting, though none of us knew just how much it would unravel. Now, Patricia wasn't about to let it go, of course not. Monday morning, Marcus found a note plastered on the back gate. Inappropriate behavior with minors. Last warning before dismissal. Signed, naturally, by Patricia, queen of the HOA. You could almost hear her smug little laugh in the ink. But Marcus just folded it and put it in his pocket, like a man who'd been handed a script he'd read 100 times before. Then Emma, she comes running across the lawn yelling his name like he's Santa Claus, ignoring Patricia's shrieks. "He's my friend," she says, gripping his hand tight. And Patricia, red-faced, sputtering, says, "Friends? What nonsense. You don't know where this man comes from, what kind of person he really is." Marcus just looked at her, calm as ever, and said, "You're right. She doesn't know me, just like you don't." And let me tell you, there was a weight in his voice that made even Patricia take half a step back. But Patricia didn't give up women like her never do. She called a little tea party war council in her living room, the place dripping with chandeliers and porcelain cups. They sat there, Patricia, Margaret Thornton, the mayor's wife, and Catherine Blackwell, oil money heiress, whispering poison, plotting to document every move Marcus made, every word out of his mouth. They called him a threat, unstable, suspicious around children. They sounded so certain, so self-righteous, but the thing they didn't know? Marcus had spent his life surviving worse than whispered conspiracies over chamomile. Because here's the twist, Marcus wasn't just a gardener. He'd been a combat surgeon in Afghanistan, decorated, a man who had saved lives under fire, who carried scars not just on his body, but in his bones. But none of us knew that, yet Patricia sure didn't. What she didn't see was that every insult, every accusation, was just giving Marcus more ammunition. And then came the showdown. A full community meeting, the event hall packed with 23 families, all waiting to hear Patricia denounce Marcus once and for all. She stood there at the podium, her voice dripping with false authority. "We have a dangerous element among us," she said. "A man with a suspicious past, psychological issues, unstable, inappropriate with minors." And then Marcus, quiet Marcus, Gardener Marcus, stood up from the back row. He walked to the front with no rush, no panic, and when he spoke, the room froze. "Dr. Marcus Thompson," he said, laying down his records. "Combat surgeon, United States Army. 2 Bronze Stars. Presidential citation. 17 children saved in Kandahar, 14 hours of surgery under fire. All alive. You could have heard a pin drop." Patricia paled, But before she could spin it, Marcus pulled out his recorder, and suddenly the whole room was filled with her own voice, sneering. People like him always try to take advantage of families like ours. Then Margaret's voice, suspicious around children. Then Catherine's, he's targeting Victoria's daughter. The gasps were deafening. And then Claire Richardson, the woman who'd once almost listened to Patricia. I stood up and said what everyone needed to hear. That for 3 years, my daughter hadn't spoken. That I'd spent a fortune on treatments. That Marcus had given me back her voice, her laughter, her childhood, and that yes, he wasn't just a hero, he was a specialist in child trauma, a surgeon, a man who had more right to respect than anyone else in that room. By the time the meeting ended, Patricia and her little empire were in ruins: lawsuits, disgrace, social exile. Marcus, on the other hand, walked out not as a gardener, but as my new director of human development at Richardson Tech and, as he revealed with the faintest smile, the new owner of the penthouse in Building 5. And you know what? That was just the beginning. 6 months later, the playground bore a new name, Dr. Marcus Thompson Park. Emma ran through the grass, chatting a mile a minute, her voice strong and unstoppable now. Marcus drove up in a BMW, not pushing a cart, but still carrying that same calm that had silenced Patricia more than any insult ever could. He welcomed new families, extended his hand to strangers who looked nervous in that shiny neighborhood, and reminded me and all of us that real power isn't in the titles you hold or the gossip you spread. It's in turning pain into purpose, in giving people their voices back, in proving every arrogant assumption wrong by simply being undeniable. And maybe the most cinematic part of it all, watching Patricia sign her divorce papers in a shabby little office months later, stripped of her status, her husband gone, her empire of porcelain and gossip crumbled into dust. Yeah, karma has a way of dressing itself up like justice sometimes. But here's the thing, was it revenge, or was it justice? Did Marcus win because he exposed them, or because he refused to let their smallness define him? Would you have stood with him that day, before the truth came out, or would you have raised your hand with Patricia, blinded by appearances? That's the question I'll leave you with. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think Marcus went too far, or not far enough. Tell me if you believe people like Patricia ever really change, or if humiliation just makes them double down. Because maybe the real story here isn't about Marcus, or Patricia, or even Emma. Maybe it's about all of us, and the way we choose to see, or refuse to see, the people standing right in front of us.